occasionally get a call out of the blue from someone who had either called Peugeot or Citroën in New York City, or the French consulate wanting to know where to get CITROEN parts, and both the home office of Citroën in New York and the French consulate would give them my number. So I would get a call out of the blue from someone I never knew before who was desperate for parts. So anyhow, April of '94 was the big year when I began to sell parts, and at that point I purchased all the new parts from Dellinger Auto Sales, which is where a lot of those factory parts went to. Since then, I've bought out numerous other parts inventories as they become available, but at this point in time, finding stashes of original parts is almost unheard of. And again, at that time, the largest wholesale supplier of CITROEN parts was on the West Coast, and many of the parts could be sourced from that wholesaler cheaper than I could import them from Europe. And mainly that was because he was buying in huge quantities. There was a lot more CITROENs on the West Coast than there was in here. And back in those days, I was selling mostly to people on the east side of the Mississippi River. That's not the case anymore. It's North America is pretty much, I sell all over the country and to Europe. And back then, Traction Avant parts were being purchased directly from France. That has changed because there's actually suppliers in other countries now that have better quality than some of the French. 1998, Dave will remember this, was another big change for me. He and I and his wife and another couple went to the ICCCR in Belgium. And after that time, I met some really good suppliers who were willing to sell to the United States. But it wasn't common to get discount. I mean, I was buying from them at the same price they were selling retail for. And nobody over there at that point was set up to do wholesale sales or to the United States, so it was a challenge. Shipping was very expensive. International shipping, as we know it today, was, I think, in its infancy. Customs clearance was a hit or miss thing. And I remember saying, I don't know what I'd do without a fax machine, because all the orders were placed by fax. Payment methods were usually very expensive, wire transfers. Nobody even wanted to talk about a credit card or anything like that. So now let's fast forward till today. And I can only tell from my personal experience, but I now purchase from multiple European suppliers, almost exclusively. A couple of them actually have wholesale divisions that are basically selling to wholesale customers in Europe. And they finally recognize that if you're buying a part to resell it, you have to have a certain amount of profit margin, which 40 years ago was unheard of. And even if they're not set up to do wholesale, most of them will allow a little bit of a discount. But it's still imperative to know the reputable suppliers, because there's still very substandard parts being sold by some and very high quality by others. Of course, the other biggest change that I think all of you have seen is the internet. Almost all my suppliers have databases that I can access through my computer, either over their website or with a direct connection. Almost all the orders are placed over the web. Payment methods are much more user-friendly, so you avoid the surcharges for payment. And it's actually, but it's still, and this has been from the very beginning in Europe, it's very necessary to cultivate and nurture a working relationship with the suppliers over there. And that means that no matter if you can do it all over the internet, an occasional phone call to exchange pleasantries and discuss something goes a long way with the people in Europe. The other big thing, and I think Dave will tell you that I do my best on this, is the changes in international shipping. And this has really changed just within the last couple of years. I've got multiple places right now where I can order something on Monday morning and I have it in my hands by Wednesday afternoon.
Oh, yeah.
And in some instances, and I can tell you one of them, I just ordered a turning headlight system for a DS21 and I got it here in my hands and I inspected everything to make sure it was all good. I reboxed it in a box smaller than it came in here in 2 huge boxes. I reboxed it into 1 box and sent it to California, and it cost within about $25 for me to ship it to California as it cost me to get it here from Europe. But again, you have to know what companies to use and how to get around. Like in that instance, it was shipped here in 2 boxes, 2 different days, because if they would have shipped it all together, it would have probably sat in customs for 3 weeks. But by being under a certain monetary threshold, they know the secrets just like I do. So there's ways to make it more affordable. So anyhow, that's what I see about CITROEN Parts. What do I see about the future of it? If the values of these cars continue to go up the way they are, parts availability I think is going to continue to be good, if not get better all the time. If the values start to drop or the interest drops in them, who knows what's going to happen. But in the last, you think 5 years, in the last 5 years, the amount of quality reproduction parts, especially for D models, has probably doubled. Yeah. And of course, the hardest parts to come by are still the ones that are USA spec or Canadian spec only. Side marker lights, some of the switches. The other thing that is becoming quite interesting is parts for fuel injected cars, the electronics for those, and some of the newer cars like the CXs are, some of the parts for those are getting very interesting also. So, does anybody have any questions?
So for the fuel injection, is it getting better or worse?
That's a good question. Fuel injection parts have not been easy to come by for a long time, and I don't see that changing. It would pay you to have a really good friend like Dale Martin, I don't think he's around here, who knows other fuel injected cars from that same era, who can tell you what you can take from a Volvo or a Saab and modify to use on your Citroën. There are suppliers in Europe that have fuel injection parts listed, and usually they're used parts, even the sensors and that kind of stuff. It's just, the demand has not been there for people to start remaking them. So anyhow, I'm not sure what time it is. All right, so we've got a little bit of time. We've got scheduled for Paul and Dave to demonstrate their suspensions and do a little craziness. If you get a chance to take a look, the 1976 parts book is here, 75 parts book if you want to look at that. This was someone actually purchased this at Red Dellinger's estate sale and recently brought it to me. I don't know how many of you might have been there, but this was the very first CITROEN, Central Pennsylvania CITROEN meet. I'm not sure if it's got a date on it, but that was the first pig roast that Red Dellinger had at the dealership. It had to be in the early 80s. Because I think the first year we came here was in maybe 86. So Red hosted 2 pig roasts at his dealership. If you look at the pictures, you'll see that the cars are parked along the road in the dealership. He gave tech sessions, had a really good time. And then after 2 years there, Red moved that here when they started the import show, and I think as I had talked before, Red was real instrumental in trying to get Bill and Chip Miller to start an import show, because there was nothing, literally nothing, that catered to import cars back in those days. So once they started to have this import show, Red was very supportive of them, and we had pig roast here for a couple of years until the person who was in charge of the food vendors decided that if we were going to have a pig roast, we had to pay him 50% of the cost of the meal to be able to sell food here. That was the end of the pig roast. So we're glad to say that we're now visiting George on Saturday night. George is here. He's going to be our host tonight. We're really looking forward to it, George. All right, so anybody wants to take a look? These pictures may be of interest to anyone. If you have an SM and you want to cringe a little bit, if you look real hard, you see a young Brad Nauss on an English Nuffield tractor, which most people don't even know what it is, crushing a couple SMs to take them to the scrapyard.
That hurts.
There's a picture here. Ken and Polly Batch were longtime Citroën owners. There's a picture of the car when they were in an accident and was brought into our shop at Red's in February the 10th of 1987. There's pictures of the finished car ready to be picked up 5 weeks later, completely repaired and repainted and ready to go. And then another sort of interesting set of pictures. How many of you have heard of Lee Iacocca? Maybe Peter knew him.
I knew
But
it.
anyhow, his cousin, his name was Albert M. Iacocca. His license plate number was AMI6. Okay, he had Citroëns for years. He owned a hot dog shop franchise in Allentown, Pennsylvania, called Yoccos, Y-O-C-C-O-S. He's passed away a long time ago, but if you get to Allentown, get a hot dog at Yoccos, because they're really, really good. But anyhow, the story behind Yoccos was his father opened a hot dog shop back probably in the 30s or 40s, and most of the people who were immigrants who moved here couldn't say Iacocca. And they basically, it came out as Yoccos, and that's how the restaurant name came up. But anyhow, he used to tell us his cousin was so mad because he didn't drive Fords, but he drove Citroën, that Lee Iacocca offered to give him cars for free, and he didn't accept them. But this was his last DS that he owned. He didn't set the parking brake well enough. It coasted down a hill into a tree. And again, there's the before and after pictures of the back end crushed clear up almost to the rear window, and then when the car went back out. So a little bit of an idea of what we were doing back in those days at the dealership. Then I had a very nice man come up to me a little bit earlier today, and he wanted me to have this. This was the window sticker for an ID19 Super that was sold at Red Citroën Sales and Service in Edders, Pennsylvania, which was what Red Dellinger's dealership was called back in those days. Suggested list price was $2769.10. Power steering added $97.83. $86 for a rear seat heater. $14 for backup lights. $10 for four-way flashers, and $27.50 for a roof antenna and rear speaker. And they would have all been items that would have been put on probably at Citroën in New Jersey. But the total price was $3,083.93. And I have to look the serial number up. This is not dated, but it's got to be probably very early 60s, I think. But it was sort of interesting for him to bring that to me. I'll leave it here if anyone wants to look. It's very fragile, so be careful with it. So, all right, so that's everything I've got. make sure to stick around. I'm going to let Paul and Dave decide where they want to put their cars. If you want to, we can maybe get Neil to move, or we can put them in line right here. But you've got about 20 minutes to line them up, and then we'll start the next seminar. All right.